My marriage was just 6 months old when a bolt of lightning struck my otherwise stable life. My husband insisted I care for his bedridden father after an accident. It was my first experience and I struggled with the responsibility. Then my husband dropped a bombshell. We're going to relax in Hawaii and you'll look after my father. With my husband and mother-in-law off to Hawaii, I was left behind, grappling with a situation they couldn't foresee, a decision that would lead to unforeseen tragedies later on. My name is Mary, and I'm 30 years old. Cooking has always been my passion. After college, I joined a major restaurant chain where I now develop new products in the planning department. 8 years into my career, I met Tom, who would later become my husband. 2 years ago, I decided to visit my favorite Japanese pub alone. Finding a seat at the counter that day, I struck up a conversation with Tom, seated next to me. Discovering we were the same age, we hit it off and exchanged contacts. Tom began inviting me to dinners regularly after that, and soon we started spending more time together. He was always upbeat and funny, qualities that drew me to him from the start. It seemed mutual, and we naturally began dating. After a year together, we got married 6 months ago and now enjoy living in an apartment conveniently located between our workplaces. Sometimes I cut corners on housework due to our busy schedules, but Tom always smiles and reassures me, "You don't have to be perfect at housework. I'm just happy being with you." I wish I had more time to cook dinner properly, I admitted once. But just having dinner with you makes me happy. Tom's response was always so warm. "Only for you. I like treating the people I care about well. I'm so lucky to have you as my wife." "Me too. I feel really fortunate to have you." Even 6 months after our wedding, our relationship was thriving with conversations like these. I thought our happiness would last indefinitely. But suddenly, those happy days vanished. One evening, I found Tom already in the living room when I got home from work. Normally, the first one home would greet the other with a cheerful "hey." But that day, there was an uneasy silence. Nervously, I approached Tom, who seemed preoccupied with his phone. "Tom, hey, are you okay?" His response was distracted. "Hey, Mary, what's wrong? You seem upset." "Oh, it's just my mom called about your mom. Dad was in an accident." "What?" I struggled to process the unexpected news. "But we can't just sit here. We have to go see him." I took Tom's hand urgently. "Why are you sitting here? We need to visit your father." "I'm afraid we can't," he replied solemnly. "No, why not? We have to see him," I insisted. "Is he okay?" "Yeah, we can't go because Mom's staying with him until he gets better." Oh no, his words made me realize there was nothing I could do at that moment. I released his hand and sank onto the sofa. "I'm really worried about him." Tom stayed silent, intensifying my anxiety. My father-in-law had recently celebrated his 65th birthday and typically took good care of his health, enjoying hiking and golfing on his days off. Tom worked for him. He was not just my father-in-law, but also Tom's father and the president of the company where he worked. I couldn't imagine Tom in his usual cheerful state, knowing his father, who he respected deeply, was going through this. When we finally visited him a week later, my father-in-law lay in his hospital bed with a weak smile. "Are you holding up, son?" I asked, feeling sorry for my father-in-law. He scratched his head and replied, "Mary, I'm sorry. I apologize for making you worry. I'm not upset. I'm just relieved that you're safe." "I'm glad to hear that," I said slowly. "Please rest for a while longer." My father-in-law smiled at my words, and seeing him smile eased my mind. The accident had left him with a spinal cord injury, and he remained paralyzed. He would spend about 2 months in the hospital for treatment and rehabilitation to assess his recovery. Even after discharge, he would need ongoing rehabilitation. Thomas decided to step in as interim president of the company while his father recovered, albeit temporarily. Having my own husband as the president was certainly unusual. While I was watching the exchange between my husband and father-in-law in the hospital room, my mother-in-law beckoned me to a corner and spoke sharply. "Hey, Mary, are you sure you're not taking advantage of Tom now that he's president?" She sneered. "Just because Thomas is in charge doesn't mean you can't have fun, right? Don't think you can manipulate Tom." "I have my own job and I'm financially independent," I replied calmly. And to be honest, I didn't even know Tom was the boss's son when we started dating. My mother-in-law's sarcasm towards me had begun right from the start of our marriage. I didn't want her to misunderstand me or harbor resentment, so I confronted her right then and there. "I didn't marry Tom for his money. I fell in love with him for who he is, I asserted firmly. What? What nonsense are you talking about? You dare speak to me like this, she retorted sharply. You should know your place. Is everything okay here? My father-in-law interrupted, sensing tension. It's nothing, my mother-in-law dismissed, shooting me a glare. Her disdainful words and actions made it clear that she viewed Tom as her precious son. Perhaps she thought I was a gold digger because we had married after only a year of dating. Her hostility towards me had been evident since the day I met her at the wedding. I never anticipated my mother-in-law would be so sarcastic under those circumstances. My husband seemed overly fond of her, which became evident a few days later when he dropped a bombshell. Mary, you know my dad will be discharged from the hospital next month. We'll be moving back to my parents' place then, he informed me casually. Wait, what? I responded, taken aback. Why the sudden move? My mom suggested it. It's a good time for us all to live together. She can't manage alone, he explained matter-of-factly. But we can't just uproot ourselves so quickly, I protested. What are you talking about? We're all family, my mother-in-law interjected sharply. My confusion grew as my husband insisted, it's decided, start packing for the move. But I can't commute to work from your parents' place. We struggle to find an apartment close to our workplaces, I argued. It's only 5 stops on the train from my parents' place. You're lucky to have a seat in the morning, he replied, already convinced that the decision was final. Despite my repeated attempts to discuss alternatives with my husband, they both seemed determined to proceed with their plan without considering my concerns. As my husband grew more devoted to my mother-in-law, his attitude toward me took a harsh turn. Each day, I endured his nagging lectures. How's the packing going? I can't take time off on moving day, so you'll have to manage everything, he instructed sharply. You're responsible for all household chores and taking care of my mother. Don't let her suffer, he added, his words weighing heavily on me. Even before the move, I felt overwhelmed by his demands. With the company in its busiest season, I juggled work and preparations for our relocation, leaving me physically and mentally drained. 2 months later, the move was completed successfully, and my father-in-law was discharged from the hospital. Despite barely having time to rest, I took on a new role as my father-in-law's caregiver. I woke at 4 a.m. to prepare breakfast and handle laundry, then hurried to my father-in-law's room to assist with his morning routine. After ensuring everyone else had eaten, I helped my father-in-law with his meals before heading off to work. Despite my efforts in caregiving and managing the household, my mother-in-law remained dissatisfied. She often tried to delay me from leaving for work in the mornings. Mary, can we talk for a moment? My mother-in-law interrupted as I hurried to leave. I need to address your breakfast. It's not up to standard. We'll discuss this when you return. Now, sit down. I'm sorry, but I really need to go, I insisted, feeling the onset of a headache from her persistent demands. Don't argue with me. Just sit down, she commanded sharply. No, I really have to leave, I replied, trying to maintain composure despite my rising stress levels. Dealing with my mother-in-law's tirades often left me with headaches and heart palpitations. It was futile to argue back then. Silence became my coping strategy to get tasks done swiftly. Her constant admonishments meant I was frequently late for work. My colleagues, noticing my tardiness, a new occurrence for me, expressed concern. 3 months had passed since my father-in-law's hospital discharge, yet my schedule remained relentless. I rushed to prepare dinner upon returning from work, only to face my husband's disdain for the hastily prepared meals I managed in the limited time available. What's this, Mary? I come home exhausted, and you've made fish. Seriously, my husband exclaimed with irritation. I'm sorry. I had to step away to tend to my father-in-law, so I made boiled fish. You should prepare something that will give me more energy. Boiled fish doesn't cut it for me, I explained apologetically. My husband grabbed a cup of noodles and began pouring hot water into it, ignoring my explanation. I noticed my mother-in-law smirking silently nearby, adding to my frustration. Feeling dejected, I went to assist my father-in-law with his evening routine. Sensing my distress, he asked with concern, Mary, you look pale. Are you all right? I'm fine, just a bit overwhelmed with work, I replied, forcing a smile and avoiding the truth. Is that so? I've been hearing raised voices between my wife and Tom lately. It's probably my fault. I'm not very skilled in many things, he sighed regretfully. I did my best to reassure him with a smile, concealing my true feelings. Deep down, I yearned to escape, but I couldn't abandon my father-in-law. The thought of leaving weighed heavily on my mind. As the year-end approached, I managed to take a few days off work, but there was no respite from household chores. On New Year's Eve, my husband made a startling announcement. "My mother and I are heading to Hawaii," my husband announced with a grin. "What? Hawaii?" I replied, stunned. "We've been planning this for a while, and I discussed it at length with my mother," he added, holding up their large carry-on bags, trying to stifle their amusement at my confusion. As they prepared to leave, my husband casually remarked, "Well, you're in charge of taking care of my father. We're off to Hawaii to relax, so you'll have to manage everything here on your own." He and my mother-in-law laughed as they shut the door behind them. That moment, something inside me snapped. Look after him. Why should I be the one doing everything? As a step-family member, I can't take this anymore. I'm divorcing him when they get back, I declared, the anger boiling over in my head. Determined, I resolved to care for my father-in-law until their return, but I decided to ignore all household chores. The next morning, I made breakfast for my father-in-law as usual, then went to his room with a towel to help him with his morning routine, my mind set on the decision I had made. My father-in-law approached me with a smile. "Mary, Happy New Year," he greeted warmly. "Dad, Happy New Year to you too," I replied. "What happened with Tom and my wife last night? They seem to be in some sort of trouble," he inquired. "They went to Hawaii," I informed him. "Hawaii?" he exclaimed incredulously, sighing deeply with a skeptical look. "Well, let's start the New Year celebrations," I suggested, trying to change the topic. "Mary, I'm sorry for everything," he apologized suddenly. "Wait, what do you mean?" I asked, intrigued. "I've been able to get out of bed on my own for a few days now. I was waiting for the right moment, but I never expected it to happen like this," he explained slowly. "What exactly happened?" I pressed. My father-in-law smiled before recounting the events. It seems my father-in-law decided to take action against how I was being mistreated. He had asked my husband and mother-in-law to help with tasks, but they ignored him. Then the company's executive director contacted him, reporting that my husband, acting as president, was behaving recklessly. Apparently, the company had even funded this trip. So my father-in-law contacted a company representative to monitor my husband's actions. They discovered his negligence at work, and everyone was furious. My father-in-law was supposed to resume his role as president after New Year's, but instead, my husband was fired and he's returning to his previous job as an employee. The house is in my father-in-law's name. While they were away, we changed the locks and planned how to keep them out upon their return. I went to the city office to pick up divorce papers. A week passed while I was there. The front door rattled and the intercom buzzed repeatedly. My husband and mother-in-law, just back from Hawaii, were trying to get in. I responded through the intercom. "Welcome back. How was your trip?" "Mary, what's going on?" "Open the door right now. I can't get in," my husband demanded. "I can't do that," I replied calmly. "My father-in-law advised me not to let you in." "What? What's going on?" my husband asked, bewildered. "Hey, did you enjoy your trip?" I asked casually. "Wait, the company paid for the trip? How did you find out?" my husband stammered, his expression revealing surprise. "I don't know," he admitted. I couldn't help but chuckle at their reactions on the monitor. My father-in-law, who had been listening in, chimed in from the side. "So, you really misappropriated company funds, Dad? Why? You're not supposed to be up and about," he remarked sternly. "I've been able to stand for a few days now, thanks to Mary's help with my rehabilitation. The managing director informed me about your misconduct at work." "Who's this managing director?" No, Dad, I didn't do anything." "Stop it. You've been fired, you incompetent expletive. Pack your things and leave my office immediately." Through the monitor, tears welled up in my husband's eyes as he began to plead. "Mary, you're not going to leave me, are you?" he begged, reaching out to me. "What? What are you talking about? Do you know how I've felt since you decided, without my consent, to move us in with your parents? You and your mother took advantage of me and forced me to care for your father as if it were my duty. Do you have any idea how difficult it's been for me?" I retorted angrily. "Calm down, Mary. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he apologized, his voice trembling. "Your apologies mean nothing. When you left on your trip, I realized it was pointless to continue this marriage with you. I'm going to live on my own. I don't want someone like you, I declared firmly. Shocked, my husband stumbled back. My mother-in-law rushed to console him, and the scene turned into a heartbreaking display of a mother and son in distress. Meanwhile, my father-in-law opened the front door and confronted them with divorce papers. Right then and there, I had them fill out the papers, then ushered them out and locked the door. Despite their repeated pleas from outside, my father-in-law remained resolute and didn't respond. I haven't seen them since. Rumor has it they are both unemployed and struggling to find a place to stay, even resorting to sleeping in a comic book cafe and taking odd jobs. It's a stark contrast to the life they once knew. For me, the separation was a fitting punishment for them. After the divorce, my father-in-law said to me, "I'll hire a housekeeper from now on, so you're free to go." Taking him up on his offer, I moved closer to my workplace and now live a comfortable and fulfilling life. I'm incredibly grateful to my father-in-law for rescuing me, and I'm determined to repay him however I can.